Sarah Martinez never imagined that her steady hands, perfected through years of polishing firearms at her family's gun shop, would catch the attention of a mysterious stranger who would change her life forever. When a weathered man in military fatigues walked into her shop on a rainy Tuesday morning and watched her work with surgical precision, she had no idea he was measuring more than just her technique. "I've been watching gunsmiths across 3 states," he said quietly, his eyes never leaving her hands as she restored the gleaming finish on a vintage rifle. "You have something special. Something that can't be taught." What happened next would transform a small-town gun shop owner into one of the most unlikely champions in the world of extreme long-range shooting. But the path from polishing guns to hitting impossible targets nearly 4,000 meters away would test everything Sarah thought she knew about herself, push her beyond every limit she believed existed, and reveal a talent so extraordinary that it would attract attention from places she never dreamed possible. This is the true story of how precision, patience, and an unexpected encounter turned an ordinary Tuesday into the beginning of an extraordinary journey that would echo across shooting ranges worldwide. Sarah Martinez had always believed that precision was a language spoken through fingertips. Every morning at exactly 6:30, she would unlock the heavy wooden door of Martinez Firearms, the gun shop her grandfather had built with his own hands in 1952. The smell of gun oil and metal polish greeted her like an old friend, mixing with the faint aroma of coffee brewing in the back office where her father, Roberto, would already be hunched over paperwork. The shop sat on the corner of Main Street in Cedar Falls, Montana, a town where everybody knew everybody and secrets were as rare as summer snow. With a population of just over 3,000 people, Cedar Falls was the kind of place where a person's reputation was built, one interaction at a time, and Sarah had spent her 28 years building hers with meticulous care. Her hands moved with practiced efficiency as she arranged the cleaning supplies on the worn wooden counter. Each tool had its place, each chemical its purpose, and each firearm its story. Sarah could read a gun like others read books, understanding its history through the scratches on its stock, the wear patterns on its barrel, and the way its action felt when cycled. This intimate knowledge had made Martinez Firearms the go-to destination for serious gun enthusiasts across 3 counties. The morning routine never varied. First, she would check the overnight humidity levels recorded by the digital gauge her father had installed 5 years earlier. Montana's dry climate was generally favorable for firearm storage, but seasonal changes could affect metal surfaces in ways that only someone with Sarah's trained eye would notice. Next, she would review the repair orders scheduled for the day, mentally organizing her workflow to maximize efficiency and ensure each customer received the attention their firearm deserved. Sarah's reputation for restoration work had grown steadily over the past decade. What had started as helping her father with basic cleaning had evolved into a specialized skill set that attracted customers from as far away as Denver and Seattle. She could transform a rusty, neglected rifle into a work of art that looked better than the day it left the factory. Her secret wasn't just technical knowledge, though she had plenty of that. The real magic happened in the details that others overlooked. When polishing a firearm, most people focused on making it shine. Sarah focused on understanding it. She would examine every surface under multiple light sources, noting areas where previous owners had gripped the weapon, where moisture had begun its invisible work, where time had left its subtle signatures. Her fingers could detect imperfections measuring less than 1,000th of an inch, variations so small that they were invisible to casual observation, but significant enough to affect both appearance and function. The process began with complete disassembly. Sarah would carefully photograph each step, not because she needed the reference, but because some of her customers appreciated seeing the transformation documented. Every screw, spring, and pin was catalogued and examined. Parts that most gunsmiths would consider acceptable were replaced if they showed even minor wear. This attention to detail meant that firearms leaving her shop didn't just look exceptional, they performed at levels their original manufacturers had only dreamed of achieving. Her polishing technique had been refined through thousands of hours of practice. She used a combination of traditional methods learned from her grandfather and modern compounds that pushed the boundaries of what was possible. The final result was a mirror finish so perfect that it seemed to glow with its own internal light. Customers often joked that they could use their rifles as shaving mirrors, but Sarah knew that the real achievement lay in the microscopic uniformity of the surface, the way light behaved when it encountered the metal, and the protection this finish provided against environmental factors. Word of her work had spread through the tight-knit community of serious shooters, collectors, and outdoorsmen who valued quality above convenience. They understood that sending a firearm to Sarah Martinez wasn't just about maintenance. It was about elevating the weapon to its highest potential. Some customers drove hundreds of miles specifically to have their firearms serviced at Martinez Firearms, often timing their visits to coincide with hunting seasons or competitive shooting events. The shop itself reflected this commitment to excellence. While the building showed its age in the creaking floorboards and slightly uneven walls that spoke of decades of Montana winters, every surface related to firearms was immaculate. The workbench where Sarah performed her restorations was lit by high-quality LED arrays that eliminated shadows and provided color-accurate illumination. Precision measuring instruments occupied dedicated drawers, each tool calibrated regularly and handled with the respect due to equipment capable of measurements accurate to millionths of an inch. Sarah's father often marveled at his daughter's abilities, though he was careful not to embarrass her with excessive praise in front of customers. Roberto Martinez had been working with firearms for 40 years, had learned from masters of the craft, and had trained apprentices who went on to establish successful careers of their own. Yet he freely admitted that Sarah's natural feel for the work surpassed anything he had encountered. She seemed to understand what each firearm needed before beginning work, approaching each restoration with insights that came from somewhere beyond technical training. Regular customers had learned to trust Sarah's recommendations completely. When she suggested modifications or improvements, they understood that her suggestions came from genuine expertise rather than sales motivation. She had guided hunters toward equipment that improved their success rates, helped competitive shooters identify factors limiting their accuracy, and assisted collectors in making acquisition decisions that enhanced their collection's value and historical significance. The relationship between Sarah and her customers extended beyond simple business transactions. Many had become friends, stopping by the shop to share stories of successful hunts, competitive achievements, or simply to discuss developments in firearms technology. These conversations provided Sarah with insights into how her work performed in real-world conditions, feedback that she incorporated into her continuously evolving techniques. Sarah's personal shooting experience contributed significantly to her professional capabilities. She had grown up hunting with her father and grandfather, learning marksmanship fundamentals in the mountains surrounding Cedar Falls. By age 16, she was regularly outperforming adults in local shooting competitions, demonstrating the same precision with firearms that characterized her restoration work. Her understanding of how subtle variations in equipment affected accuracy made her restoration services invaluable to serious shooters who demanded consistent performance. The combination of technical expertise, artistic sensibility, and practical shooting experience had established Sarah as something unique in the firearms community. She wasn't just a gunsmith or a restorer, she was a craftsperson whose work elevated firearms to their absolute potential. This reputation had taken years to build, but Sarah knew that maintaining it required constant attention to detail, continuous learning, and an unwavering commitment to excellence that never allowed for shortcuts or compromises. On this particular Tuesday morning in late October, as Sarah arranged her tools and prepared for another day of precision work, she had no way of knowing that her carefully ordered world was about to change forever. The skills she had developed, the reputation she had built, and the precision she had perfected were about to be tested in ways she had never imagined. A chance encounter was approaching that would reveal capabilities she didn't know she possessed, and open doors to opportunities that existed far beyond the familiar confines of Cedar Falls, Montana. The rain had started before dawn, drumming against the shop windows with the steady persistence that characterized Montana weather in late October. Sarah appreciated rainy days in the shop. They created a cocoon of focused concentration where the outside world seemed to fade away, leaving only her tools, and the firearm demanding her attention. The rhythmic sound of water against glass provided a soothing backdrop that helped her enter the meditative state where her best work emerged. She was deep in that state when the door chime announced a visitor at precisely 9:15. Sarah didn't look up immediately from the vintage Winchester Model 70 she was restoring. A beautiful rifle that had belonged to a competitive shooter in the 1960s and had seen decades of careful use before arriving at her shop. The customer could wait a moment while she completed the delicate operation of removing decades of accumulated grime from the action without disturbing the original factory finish beneath. When she finally glanced up, Sarah saw a man unlike the typical customers who frequented Martinez Firearms. He stood near the entrance, water dripping from a military-style rain jacket that had seen considerable use. His age was difficult to determine, somewhere between 40 and 60, with the kind of weathered face that suggested years of outdoor work in harsh conditions. What struck her most immediately were his eyes. Pale blue and intensely focused, currently fixed on her hands as she worked. "Good morning," Sarah said, her voice carrying the warmth that had made her popular with customers throughout the region. "Give me just one more minute to finish this step and I'll be right with you." The man nodded without speaking, apparently content to watch her work. This wasn't unusual. Many customers enjoyed observing the restoration process, fascinated by the transformation Sarah could achieve with seemingly simple tools and techniques. What was unusual was the intensity of his attention. While most observers showed casual interest, this man studied her movements with the focused concentration of someone evaluating a performance. Sarah completed the cleaning operation and carefully set the rifle aside, turning to face her visitor with the professional smile that had become second nature over years of customer service. "What can I help you with today?"
"I'm not here to buy anything," the man said, his voice carrying an accent Sarah couldn't immediately place.
It wasn't foreign, but it suggested origins far from Montana. "I'm here to watch you work." The statement was so unexpected that Sarah paused, unsure how to respond. In her decade of professional experience, no one had ever made such a direct request. People asked about her techniques, commissioned restoration work, or sought advice about firearms maintenance. But none had simply announced their intention to observe her working. "I'm sorry, I don't understand," she said carefully. "Are you a gunsmith yourself? Are you interested in learning restoration techniques?" The man stepped closer to the counter, moving with a controlled precision that reminded Sarah of military personnel she had encountered at gun shows and shooting competitions. "My name is Marcus Webb," he said, extending a hand that bore the calluses and scars of someone who had spent years working with tools and weapons. "I've been watching gunsmiths across 3 states over the past 6 months. You're different." Sarah shook his hand, noting the firm grip and steady confidence that characterized his demeanor. "Different how?" "Your precision," Marcus replied without hesitation. "Most people in your profession focus on the technical aspects of the work. They understand the chemistry of metal treatment, the physics of surface preparation, the mechanics of firearm operation. You understand those things too, but there's something else. You have an intuitive feel for the work that can't be taught." The compliment was flattering, but Sarah remained cautious. Cedar Falls was a small town where strangers were noticed and remembered, especially strangers who made unusual requests or asked pointed questions about residents' capabilities. "What exactly are you looking for, Mr. Webb?" Marcus gestured toward the Winchester she had been working on. "May I see that rifle?" Sarah hesitated for a moment, then lifted the partially restored weapon and handed it across the counter. She watched as Marcus examined the rifle with obvious expertise, his fingers moving over the metal surfaces with practiced familiarity. He wasn't just looking at her work, he was evaluating it with the knowledge of someone who understood quality at the highest levels. "This is exceptional," he said after several minutes of examination. "The surface preparation alone represents hours of careful work, and the attention to detail in areas that most people would never notice shows a commitment to perfection that's extremely rare." He handed the rifle back to Sarah. "How long have you been doing this kind of work?" "About 10 years professionally," Sarah replied, becoming more comfortable with the conversation as it focused on her area of expertise. "I learned the basics from my father and grandfather, but I've developed my own techniques through experimentation and practice." Marcus nodded approvingly. "That combination of traditional foundation and personal innovation is what I was hoping to find. Tell me, do you shoot competitively?" "Locally? Yes. I participate in some regional competitions, mostly precision shooting events. Nothing too serious, just enough to stay sharp and understand how the firearms I work on perform in real conditions." "What's the longest shot you've successfully made?" The question seemed oddly specific, but Sarah answered honestly. 800 yards, at a competition in Billings last spring. The conditions were challenging, with variable wind, but the rifle was properly prepared and the fundamentals were solid. Marcus was quiet for a moment, apparently processing this information. "Have you ever considered testing your abilities at longer ranges?" "Not really," Sarah admitted. "The competitions around here don't typically involve shots beyond 1,000 yards, and I've never had occasion to explore extreme long-range shooting." "What if I told you that your precision in restoration work suggests capabilities that extend far beyond what you've tested? What if I said that the same attention to detail, the same intuitive understanding of how slight variations affect performance, could be applied to shooting at distances you've never attempted?" Sarah found herself genuinely curious despite her natural caution. "What distances are you talking about?" "Distances where traditional marksmanship principles still apply, but where the margin for error becomes so small that only someone with truly exceptional skills can succeed consistently. Distances where the difference between success and failure is measured in fractions of inches at the target, which translates to microscopic variations in technique at the shooting position." The conversation was taking an intriguing turn, but Sarah still didn't understand Marcus's ultimate purpose. "Are you offering to coach me in long-range shooting? Are you recruiting for some kind of competitive team?" Marcus smiled for the first time since entering the shop, an expression that transformed his weathered features and suggested depths of experience that Sarah could only imagine. I'm offering you an opportunity to discover capabilities you didn't know you possessed. I'm offering to show you what's possible when exceptional natural ability meets proper training and equipment. What kind of opportunity? The kind that might require you to hit a target at 3970 meters. The number hung in the air between them like a challenge. Sarah understood enough about long-range shooting to know that such a distance was far beyond normal competitive ranges, well into the realm of specialized military and extreme precision shooting. It was a distance where atmospheric conditions, equipment variables, and shooter technique had to align perfectly for success to be possible. That's over 2 miles, she said quietly. 2.46 miles, to be precise, Marcus confirmed. It's a distance where everything you've learned about precision, everything you've developed through your restoration work, everything that makes you different from other gunsmiths becomes absolutely critical. Sarah looked at the Winchester in her hands, then at Marcus, trying to understand what was really being offered. And you think I could learn to shoot accurately at that distance? I think you already possess the fundamental capabilities required, Marcus replied. The question is whether you're willing to discover just how exceptional those capabilities really are. The shop fell silent except for the continuing rain against the windows and the quiet ticking of the wall clock that had marked time in Martinez Firearms for 3 decades. Sarah realized that she was standing at a crossroads, facing a decision that would determine whether her life continued along its current familiar path or veered into territory she had never imagined exploring. She thought about the years of precise work that had built her reputation, the satisfaction of transforming neglected firearms into works of functional art, the comfortable predictability of life in Cedar Falls. Then she considered the possibility of capabilities she had never tested, challenges she had never faced, achievements that existed far beyond the boundaries of her current world. If I were interested, she said carefully, what would be the next step? Marcus's answer came in the form of coordinates and a time. Tomorrow morning, 6 a.m. sharp, 47.284 north, 112.915 west. Bring whatever rifle you're most comfortable with and enough ammunition for a full day of shooting. Sarah recognized the coordinates as pointing to an area roughly 30 miles northwest of Cedar Falls, deep in the Gallatin National Forest where vast stretches of wilderness provided natural shooting ranges that could accommodate extreme distances. She had hunted in that region with her father, but never for the purpose Marcus was suggesting. The drive through the Montana countryside took her along familiar roads that wound through valleys she had known since childhood, but everything felt different knowing that her destination would test abilities she had never explored. The morning air was crisp and clear, with the kind of perfect visibility that serious shooters prayed for during important competitions. Sarah carried her favorite rifle, a custom-built precision instrument based on the Remington 700 Action that she had modified and refined over several years of competitive shooting. She found Marcus waiting at the designated coordinates, standing beside a military-style vehicle that looked capable of handling the roughest terrain Montana could offer. He was not alone. 3 other men, all with the same weathered appearance and controlled demeanor that characterized Marcus, were arranging equipment with practiced efficiency. Their setup was unlike anything Sarah had seen at civilian shooting competitions. The shooting position was situated on a ridge that provided commanding views across miles of rolling terrain. Sarah could see several targets positioned at various distances, the closest appearing to be around 800 yards, while the farthest was barely visible even with the spotting scopes that Marcus's team had positioned at intervals along the firing line. The precision of the setup was immediately apparent. Every element had been carefully planned to support accurate shooting at extreme distances. Sarah Martinez, Marcus said by way of introduction to his companions, "This is Tom Sullivan, our ballistic specialist. David Chen handles meteorological analysis. Jake Morrison is our equipment expert." Each man nodded respectfully, their expressions suggesting they had been briefed on her background and were taking this evaluation seriously. Tom stepped forward, carrying a tablet computer loaded with ballistic software that looked far more sophisticated than anything available to civilian shooters. "We've been preparing for your arrival," he explained. "Based on the rifle and ammunition specifications Marcus gathered during his visit to your shop, we've developed preliminary calculations for shots up to 2,000 yards. 2,000 yards? Sarah repeated. "I thought we were working toward 3970 meters. "We are," Marcus confirmed. "But nobody attempts a shot at that distance without first proving their capabilities at intermediate ranges. Today we establish your baseline performance and begin the process of extending your effective range systematically." David gestured toward a weather monitoring station that had been established near the shooting position. Long-range accuracy depends as much on understanding atmospheric conditions as it does on shooting technique. Wind speed and direction, temperature, humidity, barometric pressure, and even the angle of the sun all affect bullet trajectory at extreme distances. Jake indicated a collection of rifles and optical equipment that represented a substantial investment in precision shooting technology. We'll start with your personal rifle to establish comfort and confidence, then introduce you to equipment specifically designed for extreme long-range work. The variables that matter at 800 yards become critical at 2,000 yards and absolutely vital beyond that. Sarah spent the morning working through a series of shooting exercises designed to assess her fundamental capabilities. The targets at 600 yards presented no significant challenge. Her groups were consistently tight and centered, demonstrating the marksmanship skills that had made her successful in regional competitions. At 800 yards, her performance remained solid, though she could see areas where improvement would be necessary for consistent success at longer ranges. The transition to 1,000 yards marked her entry into unfamiliar territory. The target appeared tiny through her scope, and the time delay between trigger pull and impact became noticeable for the first time. Environmental factors that had minimal effect at shorter ranges now demanded careful consideration and precise compensation. Sarah found herself drawing on the same meticulous attention to detail that characterized her restoration work, analyzing each shot for information that would improve the next attempt. "You're thinking like a precision machinist," Marcus observed after watching her adjust her position and scope settings between shots. That analytical approach to problem-solving is exactly what extreme long-range shooting requires. Tom provided constant feedback about her performance, using sophisticated measuring equipment to analyze group sizes and tracking the consistency of her shooting. "Your fundamentals are excellent," he reported. "Trigger control is smooth and consistent, breathing technique is solid, and your natural point of aim is remarkably stable." David shared meteorological data throughout the morning, helping Sarah understand how environmental changes affected bullet performance at extended ranges. "Wind direction just shifted 15 degrees, he would announce, followed by recommendations for scope adjustments that maintained accuracy despite changing conditions. Jake introduced her to equipment that represented the cutting edge of precision shooting technology. Advanced optical systems that provided crystal-clear target resolution at extreme distances. Ballistics computers that calculated trajectory solutions accounting for dozens of environmental variables. Custom ammunition loaded to specifications that pushed the boundaries of what was possible with conventional rifle cartridges. By midday, Sarah was consistently hitting targets at 1,200 yards, a distance that would have seemed impossible when she arrived that morning. Her confidence grew with each successful shot, and she began to appreciate the complex relationship between equipment, technique, and environmental awareness that extreme long-range shooting demanded. "The fundamental scale," Marcus explained during a break for lunch. "Everything you've learned about precision in your restoration work applies to precision shooting, but the tolerances become much tighter as distances increase." The precision required was staggering. At extreme distances, a miscalculation of just a few inches could result in a complete miss. At 30 to 970 meters, Tom explained during one of their classroom sessions, "Your bullet will be in flight for approximately 4.5 seconds. During that time, it will drop more than 100 feet from its initial trajectory and drift several feet laterally due to wind. The mathematical precision required to predict and compensate for these factors approaches the limits of what's possible with field-portable equipment." David's meteorological training opened Sarah's eyes to environmental factors she had never considered relevant to shooting. She learned to read cloud formations that indicated wind patterns at different altitudes, to recognize temperature inversions that affected air density, and to predict how changing atmospheric conditions would influence bullet performance throughout extended shooting sessions. "Weather isn't just wind and temperature," David taught her, while they studied atmospheric data from a mountaintop shooting position. At extreme ranges, humidity affects air density enough to change bullet trajectory. Solar heating creates thermal currents that can deflect bullets several feet. Even the angle of the sun influences how atmospheric conditions affect bullet performance. Jake's equipment instruction introduced Sarah to technology that pushed the boundaries of civilian precision shooting. Custom rifles built to tolerances measured in thousandths of an inch. Optical systems that provided crystal-clear resolution at magnifications approaching the theoretical limits of atmospheric visibility. Ballistics computers that processed environmental data in real time and calculated firing solutions accurate to fractions of an inch. "Equipment consistency becomes critical at extreme ranges," Jake explained while adjusting a custom rifle that cost more than most people's cars. "A variation in barrel temperature of just a few degrees can shift point of impact by several inches at 4,000 meters. Every component, from the trigger mechanism to the scope mounting system, must perform identically shot after shot. The training regimen was physically and mentally demanding in ways Sarah had never experienced. Long-range precision shooting required absolute stability and control maintained over extended periods. Hours of practice lying motionless in shooting positions, controlling breathing and heartbeat to minimize movement during critical moments, developing the mental focus necessary to execute perfect technique under pressure. Sarah's background in precision restoration work provided advantages that became more apparent as training progressed. Her ability to detect minute variations in equipment performance translated directly to identifying factors that affected shooting accuracy. The same meticulous attention to detail that made her exceptional at firearm restoration enabled her to analyze shooting problems and develop solutions that improved her performance consistently. By the third month, Sarah was engaging targets at distances approaching 3,000 meters, well beyond the range of conventional military sniping, but still short of the ultimate goal Marcus had established. At these ranges, the challenges became exponential. Environmental conditions that had minor effects at shorter distances now demanded constant monitoring and adjustment. Equipment that performed flawlessly at 2,000 meters revealed subtle inconsistencies that affected accuracy at longer ranges. "You're entering uncharted territory," Marcus observed, during a particularly challenging training session in the Wyoming wilderness. "The techniques and equipment we're using represent the absolute cutting edge of what's currently possible. Very few people in the world have successfully engaged targets at the distances you're now attempting." The psychological pressure intensified as Sarah approached her ultimate test. Every aspect of her technique had been refined to near perfection, every piece of equipment optimized for maximum performance, every environmental variable measured and compensated for with mathematical precision. Yet the final distance represented a challenge that existed at the very limits of human capability. Sarah found herself drawing on reserves of concentration and determination she hadn't known she possessed. The same perfectionist drive that had made her exceptional at restoration work now focused entirely on hitting a target smaller than a dinner plate at a distance approaching 2.5 miles. The margin for error was so small that success required absolute perfection in every aspect of the shot sequence. Training sessions in the 5th month took place at locations chosen specifically for their ability to accommodate shots approaching 4,000 meters. Remote mountain valleys where targets could be positioned at extreme distances with clear lines of sight. Shooting positions established at elevations that provided commanding views across miles of wilderness. Environmental monitoring stations that tracked atmospheric conditions with scientific precision. "Everything has to align perfectly," Tom explained while reviewing ballistics data from a recent training session. "Rifle performance, ammunition consistency, atmospheric conditions, shooting technique, and psychological state all have to come together at exactly the right moment." At 3970 meters, there's no margin for error in any aspect of the shot. Sarah's performance during final preparations exceeded everyone's expectations, including her own. Her groups at 3,000 meters showed the consistency that indicated mastery rather than luck. Her ability to read environmental conditions and make accurate compensation calculations had developed to levels that impressed even Marcus's experienced team. The day chosen for the ultimate test featured weather conditions as close to perfect as could be expected in the Rocky Mountain region during late spring. Clear skies provided unlimited visibility, while light winds minimized atmospheric turbulence. Temperature and humidity levels were stable, reducing the number of variables that could affect bullet performance during the extended flight time to target. Sarah arrived at the designated shooting position before sunrise, allowing time for final equipment checks and mental preparation. The target, a steel plate measuring 18 inches square, was positioned at precisely 3,970 meters, according to GPS measurements verified by laser rangefinding. At that distance, it was barely visible even through the high-magnification spotting scopes positioned along the firing line. Marcus and his team conducted final preparations with the methodical precision that characterized elite-level operations. Every piece of equipment was verified and calibrated, every environmental measurement confirmed, every calculation checked and double-checked. The shooting position was adjusted to provide optimal stability and comfort for what could be an extended engagement. "This is it," Marcus said quietly as Sarah settled into her final shooting position. "Everything we've worked toward over the past 6 months comes down to the next few minutes. Remember your training, trust your equipment, and execute the fundamentals exactly as you've practiced them hundreds of times." Sarah's breathing settled into the controlled rhythm she had developed through months of training. Her heartbeat slowed to the steady pattern that indicated complete physiological control. Her mind cleared of everything except the immediate task of aligning crosshairs with a target that existed at the very edge of visual perception. The mathematics of the shot were staggering. her bullet would travel for more than 4 seconds, dropping over 100 feet from its initial trajectory while drifting several feet laterally due to environmental factors. The precision required to predict and compensate for these influences represented the culmination of everything she had learned about extreme long-range shooting. Through her scope, the target appeared as a tiny geometric shape that flickered occasionally due to atmospheric disturbance. Sarah made final adjustments to her point of aim, accounting for wind conditions that Tom's instruments indicated were optimal for the attempt. Her finger found the trigger's precise breakpoint, the same controlled pressure she had applied thousands of times during training. The rifle's recoil came as no surprise, absorbed by the precision shooting system that Jake had optimized specifically for this moment. Sarah maintained her sight picture through the recoil cycle, watching through her scope as atmospheric conditions carried the bullet towards its distant target. For 4.5 seconds, everything depended on the accuracy of their calculations, the precision of their equipment, and the consistency of Sarah's shooting technique. Mathematics, technology, and human skill converged in a test of capabilities that pushed the absolute boundaries of what was considered possible. The distinctive ring of bullets striking steel carried across the valley with crystalline clarity, announcing success at a distance that few people in the world had ever achieved. The metallic ring of the bullet striking steel at 3,970 meters echoed across the Montana Valley like a bell tolling the beginning of a new chapter in Sarah's life. In the seconds that followed the impact, as Marcus's team confirmed the hit through their spotting scopes and range-finding equipment, Sarah realized that everything about her world was about to change in ways she could never have anticipated. The celebration was subdued but deeply meaningful. Marcus and his team, men who had witnessed exceptional achievements throughout their careers, understood the historical significance of what had just occurred. Sarah Martineza, a small-town gunsmith from Cedar Falls, had just accomplished something that fewer than a dozen people in the world had ever achieved. The precision required, the mathematical complexity involved, and the absolute perfection of execution necessary to hit such a target represented the pinnacle of human marksmanship capability. "Do you understand what you've just done?" Marcus asked quietly, as Sarah carefully secured her rifle and began the methodical process of recording the shot's details in her logbook. "You've just demonstrated capabilities that exist at the very limits of what's considered physically possible." Tom was busy documenting every aspect of the successful shot, recording environmental conditions, equipment specifications, and ballistics data that would be analyzed and studied by experts in extreme long-range shooting. "The mathematical precision required for this shot is extraordinary," he explained while reviewing his calculations. The margin for error was less than 6 inches at the target, which translates to microscopic variations in shooting technique at the firing position. David continued monitoring atmospheric conditions, noting how environmental factors had remained stable throughout the critical moments of bullet flight. "Conditions were optimal," he reported, "but optimal conditions alone don't guarantee success at this distance. This achievement required absolute mastery of fundamental shooting skills." Jake was examining Sarah's rifle and equipment, documenting the specifications of every component that had contributed to the successful shot. "Equipment performance was flawless," he observed, "but the equipment is only as good as the person using it. This shot demonstrates technical mastery that goes far beyond normal precision shooting." Within hours of the achievement, word began spreading through networks that Sarah had never known existed. Elite military units, government agencies, equipment manufacturers, and competitive shooting organizations all had representatives who tracked developments in extreme long-range shooting. A successful engagement at nearly 4,000 meters was news that resonated throughout communities focused on precision marksmanship at the highest levels. The first phone call came from a representative of a major optics manufacturer who had heard about the shot through military channels. They wanted to discuss sponsorship opportunities that would provide Sarah with cutting-edge equipment in exchange for her participation in testing and development programs. The conversation revealed a world of competitive precision shooting that existed far beyond the local competitions she had known in Montana. A government contractor called the following day, inquiring about Sarah's availability for consulting work related to extreme long-range shooting systems. The details were necessarily vague, but the implications were clear. Agencies responsible for national security had taken notice of her demonstrated capabilities and were interested in discussing potential applications. International shooting organizations reached out with invitations to competitions that Sarah had never heard of, events that brought together the world's most accomplished precision shooters for challenges that pushed the boundaries of human marksmanship. These competitions involved not just shooting skill but also equipment development, ballistics research, and tactical applications that had real-world implications. Equipment manufacturers began contacting Sarah directly, seeking her input on product development and testing programs. They understood that someone capable of achieving success at such extreme distances possessed insights into equipment performance that could benefit their research and development efforts. Her background in precision firearms restoration made her opinions particularly valuable to companies developing cutting-edge shooting systems. The transformation in Sarah's daily routine was immediate and dramatic. What had been a comfortable predictability, centered around her gun shop in Cedar Falls, was replaced by a schedule filled with travel to shooting facilities, equipment testing sessions, competitive events and consulting meetings that took her to locations she had never imagined visiting. Her father, Roberto, watched the changes with a mixture of pride and concern. He understood that his daughter had achieved something extraordinary, but he also worried about how the sudden attention and opportunities would affect the family business that had been their livelihood for 3 generations. Sarah assured him that Martinez Firearms would continue operating, but both of them knew that her role in the shop would necessarily change as her involvement in extreme long-range shooting expanded. The local community in Cedar Falls struggled to understand exactly what Sarah had accomplished. Most residents knew she was an exceptional gunsmith and a skilled competitive shooter, but the significance of hitting a target at nearly 4,000 meters was difficult to comprehend for people unfamiliar with precision shooting. The achievement was remarkable enough to attract attention from regional media, bringing reporters and photographers to the small Montana town to document Sarah's story. Sarah found herself adapting to public attention that felt completely foreign after years of quiet work in her family's gun shop. Interviews with shooting sports publications led to feature articles that positioned her as a rising star in competitive precision shooting. Equipment manufacturers featured her achievements in advertising campaigns that reached international markets. Her name began appearing in discussions about extreme long-range shooting records and future possibilities for extending effective shooting distances. The technical aspects of her training and achievement interested ballistics researchers and shooting sports scientists who were studying the limits of human marksmanship capability. Universities with programs in mechanical engineering and applied physics invited Sarah to speak about the practical applications of theoretical ballistics principles. Her ability to translate complex mathematical concepts into real-world shooting performance made her a valuable resource for academic institutions studying marksmanship. Marcus revealed more about his background and the organization he represented, explaining that his team was part of a government research program focused on advancing precision shooting capabilities for military and law enforcement applications. Sarah's achievement validated years of research into equipment development, training methodologies, and environmental analysis techniques that had practical implications for national security. "What you've accomplished goes beyond personal achievement," Marcus explained during one of their debriefing sessions. "You've demonstrated that extreme long-range shooting capabilities can be developed through systematic training and proper equipment. That knowledge has applications that extend far beyond competitive shooting." The financial opportunities that accompanied Sarah's newfound recognition were substantial enough to change her family's economic circumstances permanently. Sponsorship agreements with equipment manufacturers provided not just cutting-edge gear but also financial compensation that exceeded her annual income from the gun shop. Consulting contracts offered additional revenue streams that could support both her continued involvement in extreme precision shooting and the ongoing operation of Martinez Firearms. More importantly, Sarah discovered a sense of purpose that extended beyond the personal satisfaction of exceptional achievement. Her success had opened doors to contribute to developments in precision shooting that could benefit military personnel, law enforcement officers, and competitive shooters throughout the world. The skills she had developed, the techniques she had mastered, and the insights she had gained could be shared with others pursuing similar goals. Sarah's story became an inspiration for people facing their own challenges and pursuing their own goals of exceptional achievement. The journey from small-town gunsmith to world-class precision shooter demonstrated that extraordinary capabilities could be developed through dedication, proper training, and willingness to pursue goals that initially seemed impossible. As Sarah looked back on the journey that had transformed her life, from the rainy Tuesday morning when Marcus first entered her shop to the moment when her bullet struck steel at nearly 2.5 miles distance, she realized that the most important discovery had been learning what was possible when natural ability met systematic development and unwavering commitment to excellence. The precision that had made her exceptional at firearms restoration had indeed translated to achievements in extreme long-range shooting that few people in the world could match. But more than that, the experience had revealed capabilities she had never known she possessed and opened possibilities she had never imagined existed. Her life in Cedar Falls would continue, but now it was enriched by connections to a global community of people pursuing precision and excellence at the highest levels. The familiar routines of the gun shop would remain, but they would be supplemented by travel to competitions, equipment testing, and training that pushed the boundaries of human capability. Sarah Martinez had discovered that the steady hands that polished firearms with surgical precision could also guide bullets to targets at distances that challenged the very limits of what was considered possible. In doing so, she had not just achieved a remarkable personal goal, but had contributed to expanding human understanding of what could be accomplished through the perfect combination of skill, technology, and determination. The target at 3,970 meters had been hit, but Sarah knew that it represented not an ending, but a beginning. New challenges awaited, new distances beckoned, and new opportunities to push the boundaries of precision shooting lay ahead. The journey from gunsmith to world-class marksman had revealed that sometimes the most extraordinary achievements began with the most ordinary moments. When a stranger walked into a small-town gun shop and recognized capabilities that had been waiting for the right moment to be discovered,